Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, taking a super fun and exciting video for you guys today and a very interesting topic when it comes to arcade emulation in MAME. We're going to be talking about brute forcing some games to run at full speed that in their native versions are just not going to be running at 100% frame rate in MAME, because there are options and cheats out there that will allow you to adjust sliders and overclock the CPUs on the emulation to get a playable experience where you otherwise wouldn't be able to play the game whatsoever. We're going to be using Taito's Type JC Side by Side 2 as an example, because this is a board I own and I've actually been working with a MAME developer to get some photographs and some reverse engineering of the actual board to try to get this game booting in MAME, because it uses a certain boot sequence in one of the actual chips, the DSPs, that is not yet implemented and hasn't been dumped or reverse engineered. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. Now to preface this, if you've never heard of Side by Side or Side by Side 2, you probably have heard of the Battle Gear franchise. Taito made some absolutely incredible arcade racing games, and basically Side by Side and its sequel are what would become Battle Gear. They are really fun drifting games, kind of like a Touge racing style as well. Think Initial D, except way earlier and a little bit more rudimentary in the 3D graphics department. Now by default, if you try to play this game in MAME without adjusting the CPU sliders, every single second in the game is going to take about 3 to 4 seconds in real time, so it basically seems to be running about 25 to 30% of the speed that the actual arcade board would use. Now if you actually play around with cheats and just absolutely dial up the overclock to about 300%, you're getting very close to a native 1-to-1 playable speed. And this game, as well as its sequel, are exceedingly rare in arcades. I have not seen a side-by-side cabinet in like 20 years, and it's one of those things, if you do know where there is one, leave me a comment down below. But that is kind of the fun thing about MAME, especially when you get into the cheats. You can start moving around the sliders on all of the different clock speeds, whether it's the CPU, sub-CPU, any of the DSPs for the 3D graphics, even the sound CPU, and you'll find that so long as your actual processor in your computer can handle it, and you can make games playable that weren't really playable before. And that is absolutely amazing, because we have no idea when the emulation will improve. It could be a week from now, it could be a month from now, it could be 10 years from now, or even never. And again, these boards can be slightly complex to even find. If you want to buy a side-by-side or side-by-side 2, you're going to have to do some hunting, because I looked before I did this voiceover and I could find not a single example of either of these games actually available for sale, even if you are an arcade collector and wanted to hook them up at home. Which is exactly the type of crap I do, because I love this era of 3D. These kind of chunky visuals here almost look like they're being software rendered in the CPU, but there is a DSP or digital signal processor handling the 3D on these boards. And considering this game actually brought us the Battle Gear franchise, super important in arcade history. Now if you are curious, this is a Type JC board right here, and right in the middle is going to be a Motorola 68040 CPU. And that is something that didn't see a lot of usage within arcade games. You had 68000s, you had 68020s, but then they kind of jump up to PowerPC spec almost across the board. And this is real footage running off a very real Dangerous Curves PCB that I have still yet to wire up for controls, because I cannot find a single wiring diagram anywhere out on the internet. So if you do know where there is one, or you have one in your collection, you could scan it for me. I would be highly appreciative, because I am in the realm of taking the oscilloscope out and basically trying to reverse engineer the entire pinout into the chip that would handle analog signals, because that's the only other way to do it. And that can be very difficult, because you get one chance to do it right. If you screw it up, you let the magic smoke out and the thing's really not going to do anything in the future. And that really is the difficult part of collecting these arcade boards, and why MAME emulation is so important, because not only is it exceedingly rare to even find one of these things, because a lot of the documentation is missing and troubleshooting hardware faults is basically non-existent as well. You end up in a situation where you have to be very careful, because you might be working on an example of a board that maybe only 10 or 12 other people even have a copy of, and that can definitely be really dicey. I've got a very steady soldering hand unless I'm working on something rare, and I basically get the shakes like I spent all weekend out and then tried to go to work Monday morning. Let's do a soundtrack sample so you can hear what the Type JC board sounded like, and we'll be right back with a lot more information on MAME.
Your time is almost up. 3, extended time.
Definitely a fun soundtrack and fun sound effects. Now going over to my Dangerous Curves PCB, you can take a look at what this should have looked like when it's running on the real hardware, and I would say the frame rate we're getting in MAME by overclocking the ever-living hell out of that CPU is getting very close to the frame rate that would be exhibited in something like Dangerous Curves, and that really is impressive. Now I do want you to be aware though that overclocking the CPU within MAME is not just basically a set it and forget it sort of thing. There is definitely a clock speed that's going to work really well, but if you push too hard you may end up having issues in the game. That is because some of these things just cannot run at infinite speed. It's like the CPU in your PC today. You couldn't just try to overclock it to 10 GHz, it absolutely wouldn't even boot. You would not be able to do it whatsoever. This hardware, even in emulation, is the exact same idea. You can only push so far before you end up in a situation where nothing is going to work whatsoever. You'll see here, that's where I lose control of Dangerous Curves because I don't have control whatsoever. Start and things like that actually work, and even coining up, but I have no pedals and I have no wheel in the game. And that is why, again, stuff like MAME arcade emulation is so incredibly important, because I totally get I'm the idiot that actually collects these things and then puts himself through absolute misery trying to reverse engineer stuff when there is no wiring diagram out there. And I am the type of person that enjoys doing that, but for 99.9998% of everyone else, you definitely don't want to get involved in that. You don't really enjoy it. So being able to play something like Side by Side 2 in MAME at basically what amounts to close to a full speed is so fundamentally great. Now, if you've never used cheats in MAME before, they are incredibly easy to install, and again, I will leave a link in the description below as to where to find them. And these cheats aren't just for something like improving the CPU speed in a game like Side by Side 2. One of the most popular games will have a bunch of fun gameplay cheats that you can definitely kind of check out, level selects, infinite energy, things like that. They can be very useful as well for practicing on games like Bullet Hell Shmups in my opinion. But this is really where those cheats come into effect, and those slider controls really make a huge difference. Just so you know, I am at 300% CPU overclock on the main CPU, that Motorola 68040 within software emulation, and that is getting me a very close to 1-to-1 speed. And the best way to check something like that in an arcade racing game is you take a look at the lap timer and you see how long it takes for a single second to count up. I would probably say I'm running this at about 95% its native speed, because it takes a little bit over a second for a second actually to elapse on that clock. And I will say Side by Side and Side by Side 2 are incredible games, and if you want to play them what basically amounts to native speed, there is a port of these over to PlayStation 1. The graphics are definitely going to be a downgrade, but it's definitely something that's going to be a little bit easier for you to actually enjoy. But definitely get into cheats in MAME, because you will find a lot of games out there that don't run at full speed can be made to run at full speed. And the reason they're just not actually getting there yet is there needs to be improvements in the emulation of the 68040. I'm thinking maybe some of the Amiga emulation scene or even the FPGA scene could help out with something like this. Let's do one more soundtrack sample just so I can try to convince you one more time to play Side by Side 2, and I'll be right back. I just love when Taito makes arcade music, whether it's Zuntata or any other musicians. They made some of the best soundtracks in arcades in my opinion, and Side by Side and Side by Side 2 are just games that basically everyone's forgotten about or didn't know existed in the first place. So that's basically the premise of this video. MAME can do more than you think it can if you start getting under the hood and start playing around with the clock speeds. Compared to actually trying to get an overclock out of real hardware, your PC or a console, you really can't do any fundamental damage here because you're just dealing with it in software. If the game becomes unresponsive, if it starts to crash, you just go in and dial back the overclock, and it's not like you're dealing with any real voltages or anything else, because it is, again, arcade emulation. So definitely grab those cheats, play around with them, and if there's a game or two out there that you tried to run and it wouldn't run at full speed, try playing around with the overclocks. My only recommendation is to look up footage on YouTube first to see if it runs slow for everyone, or if it's because you brought a rotten potato to the party, because you do need to have a pretty decent CPU if you want to overclock here, and I'm running on an i9-12900K at 5.4 GHz in case you're curious. But that is how incredible MAME is. Hopefully the emulation improves one day, but in the meantime, we have overclocking. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.